put this in your socials, support our Patreon. Back in a quick second.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
All right, everybody, welcome back to I Mix What I Like. Jared Ball here with you again. Very happy to be so. Our next guest is a podcaster, an activist, an artist, an author, and also a native son to Philadelphia and the MOVE movement. He has a new book called Ona MOVE, Philadelphia's Notorious Bombing and a Native Son's Lifelong Battle for Justice. And of course, I'm talking about Mike Africa Jr. Mike Africa Jr., welcome to the program. Good to meet you, see you, and welcome.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here. How you feeling today?
I am, as we say, as good as could be expected, and looking forward to our conversation. How are you?
I'm good. I did my push-ups.
Oh, wow. You better. I can't say I see.
Listen. Health is the most important thing, man. Take care of yourself.
Oh, no question. Where I'm at, though. No. Where I'm at, though, I miss push-ups. Where I'm at with my physical, I got to do other things. So I'm fresh off the stretches and the tension bands. Yeah.
That's good too, though. It's really just about activity. It don't really matter if you do push-ups or run or whatever, as long as you stay active. That's what it's about.
Got to stay active, and I'm gonna take get my 60 minutes of walking in later. So there we are. Get the steps in. So as I've been telling a lot of people lately with a lot of the work that's been coming out, I have not had a chance to read the entire book. I've read a little bit of the beginning, and I always skip and read the epilogue or how people conclude. I'm interested how they conclude, but there's a lot. I did want to ask, first of all, for you to lay out what you're doing in this book, but I did also want to ask, because I had it's been a little bit a while now, but I had for a time followed your podcast where and I'm wondering, to what extent are the stories you were telling in your podcast elaborated upon here, or is this new, etc.? But beyond that, please just break down what you've done in this book, and congratulations. And it's and you've written it with D. Watkins, who I've also crossed paths with here in these Maryland streets. So just another, but yeah, please go ahead.
So this book is about, it's more like an in-depth look into the MOVE organization, how it was started by the founder, my great uncle John Africa, and it kind of goes into why he decided to start the organization. The organization is like 50 years old, but nobody has ever written a book about it. Nobody from MOVE wrote a book about it. And so my job for this book was to talk about the bombing, but talk about the lead up to it and why the government felt the need to drop a bomb on MOVE, and why MOVE took the position to just stand steadfast and like knowing that I'm sure they didn't know that a bomb was going to be dropped on them, but they definitely knew from the attacks previously by Frank Rizzo's officers in Philly that, you know, the police department was very vicious at the time. And, you know, they stood strong and said, whatever you come with, we're going to match you. And that led to a bombing. So my job was to talk about it and to give people answer some of those questions that people had no answers to for the past 50 years.
You do recount some very troubling experiences, and you make the point that I would like you to tell us, to take us back to your experience with the bombing, but you do point out that this was not the first. The 85 bombing was not the first violent attack on MOVE, and then you also talk about, at the end of the book, you at least mentioned the sort of, I don't know, serendipity or random fortune of you not being in the house that day in 1985.
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about what was happening in the house? Who was there? Why was it seen as such a target and a threat?
Well, the real deal is that, you know how it is, man. The government don't want black people advancing. They don't want, the whole COINTELPRO program that was set up by the government, man. They, any Black Messiah, neutralize them, discredit them, find any misdeeds and exploit it. Use the media to your advantage to take these organizations down. That didn't stop just because the MOVE organization was a new group, newer than the Black Panther Party or some other groups that were fighting for liberation. So, Frank Rizzo, who was a very racist mayor in Philadelphia, my mother, my father, and other MOVE members were, doing their protesting against injustice, protesting against the Philadelphia Zoo and the circus and different places that enslaved animals. MOVE would say things like, the same system that brought Africans to America in chains is the same system that brought lions to this country in crates. And, the same slavery is happening and exploitation. So, but MOVE got under Rizzo's skin. Rizzo didn't want MOVE people saying anything against the system, against him. And they attacked MOVE. They attacked our house. My mother was 8 months pregnant with me, and they put her in jail. And I was born in a jail cell 5 weeks later. The attack was so vicious, it was hundreds of rounds of ammunition, firefighters using deluge hoses that blasting against the house, tearing the house down with water cannons, and MOVE was like, look, if you come at us like that, we're going to defend ourselves. So they prepared for battle. And eventually it led to the government dropping a bomb on them and killing 11 people, including 5 kids. My connection to MOVE had just been, I was one of the children that was born in the organization, and then, raised in the organization for some years. Fortunately for me, my grandmother and my aunts, they saw the escalating tension and they kept me away from the house that was actually bombed. So that's why I wasn't in the bombing. But if when my mother told my aunt to take me to Osage Avenue, if my aunt listened to her, I would have been one of the kids in the fire.
First of all, I didn't confirm this, so I apologize. How are you for time? What is your time like this morning?
I got time.
Oh, okay, just checking. Yeah, that's so. Well, let me back up now. So you said a minute ago. Well, we'll come back to the story, but you said a minute ago that your book attempts to answer a lot of questions people have been asking. Can you give us an example of what are the questions that you address that you feel like people have been waiting for a long time?
I think people don't really understand what makes MOVE tick. What makes MOVE, how MOVE, the inner workings of the MOVE organization. Like, as kids, what was it like? A lot of people saw dreadlocks. Listen, dreadlocks are popular now in 2024, but in the 1980s, I can assure you, they were not popular. And, we were dreadlocked, and a lot of times we were naked out in front of our house in public. A lot of time, our raw food diet. MOVE children ate all raw food. We didn't eat any cooked food. And, there was these are like a lot newer. You hear the Tabitha Browns, you hear these different people talking about the power of raw food and all of this stuff. But it wasn't like that for us in 1980 something. It wasn't some cute little store with a nice colorful sign on it that said, you're invited to experience this magic of this nature's candy or whatever. It was a sweet potato, raw. You bite it and you chew it like an apple. And there was no processing with juicers and machines. It was just raw food, the way nature gave it. And, people saw that as abuse. The children don't eat raw food. Oh, we didn't go to school. Mm-hmm. We didn't go to school. We were taught what the organization's adults felt that we needed to be taught, which was John Africa's teaching, which was exercise, health, and fitness. Some of these things landed well for the public, but some didn't. If you don't send your kids to school, that's a crime. But see, MOVE would say things like, at one time it was a crime for Black people to learn how to read. Mm. Now it's a crime for, so the way they saw it was, they must be trying to use that educational system to, instead of educating you, indoctrinating you. And they didn't want us believing that Christopher Columbus discovered America. And they didn't want us believing that George Washington was a good person. So they taught us MOVE history. And no, we didn't go to school. So these questions of why these things happen are just, a lot of them are answered. Also, something that's answered is a lot of the internal struggles that MOVE had with each other. Everybody didn't agree with each other. MOVE is not monolithic. You know, everybody don't believe that we should take this political stance. Not everybody agrees that we should have a confrontation with Frank Rizzo and the police. But things, you know, some people were outnumbered, some people were overruled, some people left the organization. There was always a lot of internal struggles and fighting each other. So, you know, and all the way up to trying to get people out of prison that had spent 40 years in prison, all the way to the point of 2018 when I was trying to get my mother out of prison after she spent 40 years in prison. The internal struggle where people disagreeing with each other almost cost us her freedom. And so, you know, I had to push ahead. I had to fight ahead. I had to ignore some of those people. I had to challenge some of those elder leaders in the organization. And all of that's laid out in this book, you know, and the purpose of laying it out is because there's a lot of people coming after us, you know, and people need to understand, they need to be able to see the signs. This revolution is hungry for fuel, for support. And, you know, I didn't want to talk about some of those things, but I think it's important for people to understand what organizations go through, especially when they're in a position where money is involved and, you know, people have the opportunity to get money versus relinquish that money and see people free. It's a whole lot of inconsistencies in the way people talk versus what they're saying they want. It's a lot. So this book really goes deep into who those people were, what they did, and why they did it.
Right on. So I definitely want to come back to the story of your parents specifically, but if we could just start back up a little bit for myself and anyone else who may need some of the background and history. Again, I haven't gotten to too much of it, but just in looking over the table of contents, you talk a lot about, or seem to talk a lot about John Africa's relationship to the FBI. And so could you talk about who John Africa was and as the founder of MOVE, and give us some of that background or a summary of what what readers will learn more about when they read the book?
Yeah, so John Africa was the founder of MOVE, and he started the organization, he said, because life was in trouble and it needed help. And by talking about life, meaning people, animals, and the environment. And, you know, he saw the way life was being treated, just people going to jail, getting arrested for crimes that politicians commit the same crime or far worse, and they never face the same punishments that poor people face. They never face the same punishment that Black people face. So he wanted to do something about it. He was tired of it. He was angry about it, and you know, he was very charismatic. He had a lot of deep wisdom and understanding about the system. He would say things like the prisons are nothing but modern day slave plantations. And he would say the system is controlled by pressure. And as a way to put the pressure on the system, you have to target them. You have to target them specifically. You can't expect to get a change without targeting the people that are actually responsible for creating or supporting the problem. He would protest at judges' houses. He would go to their churches. He would go to kids' schools and protest against the daughters and the sons of the people who just passed this law saying that qualified immunity. He would go to the families of the people who would support these things, and he would protest and threaten, and sometimes they would get into physical altercations, and he was just relentless. And in the 70s, he created the organization by just having other people that agreed with him. And a lot of those people were his family members, like my grandmother, Laverne, and my great aunt Louise, and it got to the point where he started feeling like Move should do the same thing to the system that the system is trying to do to us, which is constant pressuring them to have it their way. And once he got on the radar of the FBI, that happened. The FBI started saying that he was making bombs and brandishing weapons, and they had some key witnesses from the organization to testify against him. He represented himself in federal court, a federal court system that has a 97% conviction rating. The federal prosecutors were Harvard and Cornell trained prosecutors who never lost a case. They were undefeated. And him, with his third grade education, his dreadlocks, and his dirty clothes that he looked like he just finished walking his dogs in, went into court representing himself, and he beat the trial. And so, that display of wisdom and power, it led to MOVE members feeling like John Africa was God. And it led to the system feeling like John Africa need to be destroyed.
So what is this? So what will we learn in the chapter about the FBI? Is this, I'm assuming this is about surveillance or attempts to infiltrate MOVE? Is that what this is?
Well, you'll learn some of the people, like I mentioned earlier about infighting. Any organization that's effective, any organization that's affecting change, or that has the potential or the power to affect change, will have people among them that are not on their side, pretending to be on their side, but actually not. And, in the Black Panther Party, many original members talk about their fears and wondering how many Panthers were actually Panthers and how many were actual informants. At one time, I've heard some of them say that at one time there were more informants than there were Panthers. MOVE faced the same things. And so COINTELPRO was very active, and it ran through MOVE. And some of the people that were on our side turned out to be FBI informants. And this book lays out that information. It's also really, I hate to use the word entertaining, but it feels like a movie, right? You remember on Malcolm X when they had to go see Brother Johnson at the hospital, and he said, and Malcolm X commands the Muslims to march with him to the hospital. And he says, and then the police officer says, that's too much power for one man to have. That is what it was like in real life with John Africa versus the federal government. He represented himself. He had a co-defendant. His co-defendant said that the way John Africa behaved in court, he thought they were going to get more charges put on them, because John Africa would actually walk up to the prosecuting attorney, put his arm around him, like he would yank him toward him and say, you ain't gonna win this case. I'm going home and I'm taking my brother with me. And the way he did it, he was like manhandling this prosecutor, this little white man. And he said the way he did it, the impact of his grabs and slaps on his back, like he felt like he might get charged with assault. And if it wasn't for the fact that there are court documents to back up what I'm saying in this book, people wouldn't even believe it was true.
So the only problem I have with what you said is because I have this undying hatred of Spike Lee's film, is that I would only want you to reference that what Spike was referencing was an actual reported event. So let's give credit to the original actual event of Malcolm and the cop fearing all that power that is supposed
too much power for one man to have.
Yeah. I don't want Spike's movie to get the credit for that. That actually was reported to have happened. That's
you got to rationalize things, right? So like you look at what they said, what they show,
right?
Then you got to say what probably really happened. And taking it away from Spike Lee's film, I would imagine that police officer actually said that's too much power for that nigga to have.
There you go. That's probably correct. But anyway, so yeah, no, that's yeah, I appreciate that. And
wait, hold on.
No, sure.
How come you don't like Spike though?
Oh no, well, specifically that film, I don't put it on to the man himself, but and I have the shortest, because I don't want to go too far, but the shortest version is that we get very little of Malcolm and his actual politics and what made him a threat in that film. It takes 90 minutes before we even see Malcolm as Malcolm X, and so much time was spent on the early development so they could get into the fantasy of the change, that we don't get time with his actual politics. And so I feel like people walk away from the film not being introduced to the actual militancy and the analysis. So I've even said that I think you get more actual Malcolm X in the brief Mario Van Peebles rendition in Will Smith's Ali film than you get in the entire Spike Lee film. But that's my very short answer for that. But so I'm not really saying I don't like Spike. I just, that film in particular is, I have a particular problem with
that. I kind of had the same kind of feeling when I was reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. It's like there was a lot of time spent on talking about his reefer days and his, and I don't know, but
see but that's something I've only come to learn more about and appreciate, only, to be honest, in the last year, regarding George Jackson. And when I went back and Ashanti Alston, shout out to him, sent me the copy of the Who Killed George Jackson book. My point being that a lot of what we read and have grown up reading are important works that are written for very specific political purposes, not necessarily for the revolutionary political purposes we as readers might want. So whether it was George's Soledad brother, whether it's Asada's autobiography, whether it's Malcolm's autobiography, these are all written for very political purposes that were not necessarily in each case meant to recruit revolutionaries as much as they were to tell a story to get somebody maybe out or over into a new, so it's not that they're bad necessarily, but they're not always, I think, to the point you're getting at. Like, if we really want Malcolm's analysis, we have to go to the speeches, to the other historical research on his interactions and his work, etc. And I would say the same, certainly, well, that's why we have Blood in My Eye as opposed to Soledad Brother, and then that's why we have to go to other histories for the so that's why, like, I would never want to see, with all due respect to what you've done with this, but I would never want to see a Hollywood attempt to do a movie on MOVE. Like, I'm always opposed to that, because I always think we're not going to get what we think we're going to get. We're going to get something that testifies against it. But yeah, that's,
I think that there would definitely be an attempt to whitewash the trueness of the story, the history. Like when the government dropped a bomb, I don't think they would make a movie. I don't think there would be a movie made where the police commissioner would be saying, we're going to use this C4 and we're going to put shrapnel in it so that when it explodes, anything in the vicinity of it will be stabbed and sliced with nails and weapons. Like, I don't think they would do that. And, the secret meetings that they were having about how they wanted to eliminate everyone. We know that this will be hard. Philadelphia will take a hit, but eventually, it'll blow over. We'll use the news media as COINTELPRO instructs to slander and to maim their character to the point where people won't even support them, even though we killed them. No one comes out alive. And then even after the bombing, and children are trying to escape and they're being shot and they're being melted by this 2,000-degree fire, and a 13-year-old boy is burned and he just saw his mother get shot and burned. And a police officer saves this 13-year-old boy. He runs and grabs him and takes him away from the fire and the shooting. And the police officer is then harassed and ran off the police force and called nigger lover by the other police officers. On the actual police footage of the fire, you can hear police officers saying, that's the last time those MOVE members will call the police commissioner a motherfucker, and laughing, you know. And there are a lot of things that movies will show, but I know that buddy cop films and making the police officers look like the heroes are much more preferred in Hollywood. And
it's Bad Boys Summer right now. It's perfect time. It's Bad Boys Summer right now as you speak.
You know, and so it's like, you know, to show these things in their true depiction, you know, I would be surprised if Hollywood wants to put it out there the way it actually happened.
So what they would do, though, so this would be my concern, because they're getting ever more sophisticated with it. What they would do is that if they did do it, they would do it, but they would tell the story through the lens of that one cop you're talking about. They would do it so that to make it look like he represents the
police force. Right. There's some bad apples. We got some bad apples. Most of the police officers are good, but we got some bad apples. Well, I can tell you on May 13th, it was the complete opposite. One was good, and the rest were trying to shoot. Listen, they shot over 10,000 rounds of ammunition that MOVE. 10,000 rounds. You know how many rounds of bullets that is? In 90 minutes, they shot over 10,000 rounds. They ran out and had to send for more. On the police footage, you can see police cars driving up to the site, bringing more cases of ammunition. And the type of ammunition they used was incredible. They used M16s, M1s, M14s, AK-47s, shotguns. They used 50 caliber machine gun. They used armor-piercing anti-tank guns, grenades. They had every type of weapon of war that exists, including a bomb, bombs. You know, so
I didn't want to get us banned from the live, so I'll use this instead. But this is relatively the size of a package of 20 AR-15 rounds. Roughly the size of this cleaning kit here. So that's what I was trying to think. That's exactly my point. I was like, we need a graphic. Like, this is about 20. You figure 10,000. And the other thing was me and Dr. Burrows is in the chat, and our other homeboy, I think all three of us were there that day. 00 African. We went, for me, was my first trip to Osage Avenue after years of hearing and reading about the case and all of this. And what I was struck by was the compact, small size of the street and the row houses there.
That's why so many houses burnt down, because the house that was bombed, 6221 Osage Avenue, that house that's the house where the fire started. And the fire, according to the records, the police commissioner told the fire commissioner to let the fire burn. The fire commissioner agreed, told his firemen to stand down. The fire became enraged, and it burned to over 2,000 degrees, a temperature that is hot enough to melt steel. And it leapfrogged across the street and ignited other houses on the other side. That's why 61 homes burned down.
And I was even just thinking of it in this moment in terms of the 10,000 rounds. So what you just said about the fire is, of course, unimaginable. But 10, I'm just trying to think of the space that we're talking about and unloading 10,000 rounds into what would have been, I mean, the row houses are small. It's
before that house was so small. Before the bomb was even dropped, they had shot and blown the front porch off. There was no the whole wall in the front, the whole porch and everything was in the street before they even dropped the bomb. 10,000 rounds of ammunition, and these were not service revolvers. You know, an AR-15 is a good size bullet, a 50 caliber machine gun, M16s, M14s, M1s, shotguns. Man, they shot so much firepower. And listen, people get sidetracked with the other weaponry because when you hear bullets and bombs, it kind of takes away from the damage that a fire hose from a firefighter can do. It's kind of like 11 deaths occurred. Move people lost 11 members of our family that day. 5 of them were children. So because lives were lost, rarely do the residents that lived in that area get any respect. But people lost their homes. And, you know, if you, in comparison to a home, I mean, in comparison to a death, a home is nothing, right? 11 people died. 5 of them were children. So who cares about a house? That's kind of how it generally goes. The homeowners, the neighbors, the 250 people that were homeless, they don't get the respect that they deserve. So that's kind of how it is when you compare it with bullets versus fire hoses. But those fire hoses are so powerful, they can shoot 10 stories high straight up into the air. And firefighters are trained to never use them on buildings that they know people are inside of. But they still use those fire hoses on that building. They had 3 of them trained on Move's house. And those things could kill you. They could certainly kill a child. You know, they came with all kind of weaponry. We seen the 60s Birmingham riot. They call it a riot, a police riot is what I call it. In the 60s, when the attack dogs and the fire department was deployed to shoot those are water cannons. They call them cannons for a reason. And they, you know, those things are deadly. If Move shot any weapons, any firearms at the police or the firefighters after being assaulted with those weapons, I would say that they were well in their right. How you going to come to my house because of some kind of thing that you say somebody else did, and you just going to start shooting fire hoses at my house with my kids inside? I don't have the right to self-defense. You know, and that's what I mean when I say the system is so messed up. They can come to your house and imagine if 50 Move members went to their house and shot 10,000 rounds of ammunition at them and their family. You know, none of them went to prison. None of them are, you know, the only person that went to prison for that whole May 13th bombing was one of the survivors of Move. Her name was Ramona Africa. You know,
shout out to Ramona. Yeah.
Such an injustice. So anyway, this book talks a lot about these things and the lead up and the racism, the extreme race. You know, we got 2,200 statues or monuments in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is more than half of the population is Black. There are over 2,200 statues or monuments in Philadelphia, and only 6, I believe 6 now represent Black people.
And you know, the greatest injustice of all of that, of all of those,
fictional character. One of them is a fictional character who actually was a real fighter.
Who was a real?
No. Rocky Balboa is a fictional character. Sylvester Stallone actually was a real fighter. But
Chuck Webster, who was based on, was a real fighter too.
Chuck Wepner was a real fighter too. Yeah. Who Sylvester Stallone, according to Chuck Wepner, stole the character and created Rocky. And listen, the greatest heavyweight champion in the world of all time, Muhammad Ali, lost. His first loss was to Joe Frazier, who is from Philadelphia, who represents Philadelphia.
And how many statues does he have?
Until recently, within the last 5-7 years, there was no statue of Joe Frazier. Bernard Hopkins, the light heavyweight champion at the age of 50. Most fighters retire in their early 30s. This guy was the light heavyweight champion at the age of 50. He's from Philly. There is no statue of him. You know, and the reason why.
So Frazier does have one now.
He does have one.
I didn't know that. Okay.
In the last 5-7 years, he does have one. But you know what? You don't know where it is. You've never seen it before. It doesn't get 1 million visitors a year like the Rocky statue does. You know, and that's crazy. Not because part of that is promotion, but who's promoting it and why? You know? So this book really talks about a lot of that racism. Rizzo was the mayor when Rocky came to Philadelphia. Rizzo wanted to bring Rocky to Philly. They're both Italians, you know, the whole connection, and they wanted to do this thing. So they did the movie in Philly. And they wanted to support whiteness and Italianness and all of that. So that's what they did. And now people are more familiar with Philadelphia for a fictional character than they are for two great champions that were world champions. These are not unknown fighters.
No, to what is probably the greatest honor Hopkins has is that the legendary mayor of DC hip hop, Head Rock, a proud DC native, did a whole track in tribute to Bernard Hopkins from Philadelphia. That's legendary. You got rappers from other cities praising B Hoppin'. So yeah, that's well, relative to what you were talking about, obviously that's lightweight travesty, relative to what you're talking about.
It just speaks to the type of prejudice. You know, I mean, if listen, when during the uprisings in 2020, armed guards, they were armed with automatic rifles, were standing in front of the Christopher Columbus statue so that no one would tie a rope around his neck and drag him down the street by horseback like they were doing all over the country. Those same armed guards would not protect children that were trying to escape a burning building. You know, so it's just a lot of problems, a lot of racism, a lot of hate. And so, you know, this book is kind of a warning to revolutionaries to follow. We mentioned that earlier. Like, this book was written for the revolutionaries to come. This book was written for the people that want to understand the movement, the way we move, the way we were raised. I didn't eat my first plate of spaghetti and meatballs until I was 7 years old. You know what I mean? Like, we ate all raw food until my grandmother took me out of the organization and raised me more regular. You know, but this book talks about all of it. So I did want to ask you about to talk a little bit about your parents and then your grandmother, who you said, as you say, took you out of the organizations. Could you I guess summarize a little bit of what we can read about in your book, but who are your parents? What happened? What was and maybe outline some of the quote unquote controversy that I think you even alluded to already today. And forgive me, I am listening, but I do have to step away from the camera. But I just don't want to, you know. But as you're answering, I am listening. But could you talk a little bit about that? Yeah. So the organization had disagreements about the people in the house in prison. My mother and my father were two of the Move 9. Move 9 were 9 people that were arrested on August 8th, 1978, that were serving 100 years in prison for a crime that they did not commit. And my parents were working to the whole organization was supposed to be working to get the people out of prison. But once they started fighting with each other about ideology, basically, it created a division. And that led to physical assaults on some of the people In one case, one of the MOVE members assaulted his own mother, and it created a split. And my grandmother, and my aunts and uncles were on one side, and my mother and some of the other MOVE members were on the other side. And it was a lot of back and forth in just people just going at each other's throats. And that led to a separation where some people just decided that they didn't want to be a part of the organization anymore. And my grandmother was one of those people. And she left the organization. And since I was living with her because my parents were in prison, when she left, she took me with her. My mother, still a MOVE member, wanted me to be raised in MOVE. But because my grandmother saw the tension and the confrontation gearing up with the city again, she decided that she was not going to send me back to MOVE, even though my mother told me she wanted me to go back. So, yeah, that's how that happened. And a lot of other people left too. The organization went from having maybe 50 committed members and supporters to having maybe 25.
So that unfortunately sounds eerily familiar with other organizations we've read about in terms of when people get locked up and the struggles that ensue, often inspired by the state. But
yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. What were you saying?
No, I said certainly stoked by the state.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to. So first of all, we're going to have you come back after I get a chance to actually read more of the book. And I know my man, Dr. Burrows, is in the chat and he's anxious to read it. And maybe he will join us for that conversation. Todd does a lot of work around the history of Mumia, who is often obviously related to the movement. Right. He doesn't. I did do a word search for Mumia in the PDF. So you mentioned him, but I think appropriately he's not a prominent figure in this story, and some might expect that to be the case. So maybe talk a little bit, if you would, about Mumia, his relationship to MOVE, and yes, Todd is saying he will join us for that future conversation. So look forward to that. But yeah, where is Mumia in relationship to MOVE?
Mumia was a journalist. Mumia is a journalist, and he wasn't one of the central figures. Neither was Ramona, one of the central figures of the organization's early beginning. Mumia, like Ramona, became kind of impressed by the way John Africa represented himself, impressed by the behavior of MOVE people, the confidence they had, the information about the system and injustice, and also their physical regimen. The way, some of them were doing 5,000 push-ups a day just for fitness. Like, it was kind of next level strength. And so people were just impressed by their behavior and the way they carried themselves. And they had a reputation for, just being strong, being united. So, and Mumia was a journalist that would talk about what was happening with MOVE, and he wouldn't listen to the COINTELPRO handbook. You got to remember, Mumia is a Panther. It was a Panther too, a Black Panther. And so because he was a Panther, they had COINTELPRO had surveillance on him since he was a 14-year-old kid. So he understood what that was. So as a journalist, he would tell the truth about what happened. He wouldn't listen to what the COINTELPRO would say about use the media to your advantage and all of that. He would tell the truth. And because of it, he became a target as well. And because he supported MOVE, when he was arrested for killing a police officer, a crime that everybody that knows anything about the case know that he didn't commit, MOVE supported him and still do till this day. So, but no, he wasn't a prominent figure in the organization's beginnings, but he's always been supportive and writing the truth about what's happening with MOVE, and that just telling the truth is a threat. So that's where Mumia fits in the book. That's where he fits in the history of MOVE as well. This book is really about, a lot of this book is about my work to free my parents as well. Mm-hmm. People ask me like, Mike, why did you feel the need to write this book? I mean, I wish I didn't have to write it. But the 50-year history of MOVE, no one has written a book about MOVE from our side. Ramona never wrote a book about MOVE. There's 9 MOVE members that were in prison for 40 years at least. None of them wrote a book, and I just kind of think of it like, it had to be done. It had to be done. We talk about the other people that write books about history and the way they told it, the way that it wasn't accurately portrayed and all of this stuff. Some journalists couldn't get close enough to the real story, so they write it a little weird. It's not 100% accurate, so now here we are. We have the inside connection. These people are still alive. The people that started the organization, or the people that were brother and sister to the people who started the organization, we are right now as close as we're ever going to get to that information. And for it to never be written by a person who lived it, it just doesn't make any sense. So that's why I wrote it. I wish I didn't have to. Like I said, I wish my mother could have wrote it. I wish my father could have wrote it. My mother is John Africa's niece. When she was a child, a little girl, he would take her to his house and, take her for bike rides and trips to the park, and he helped raise her. Nobody knows more about John Africa than she does, other than his sisters who grew up in the house with him. They didn't write a book about John Africa. They didn't write a book about the story. And so I started this process because it needed to be done. And I know that you're not going to get a more accurate telling of it than from one of us doing it.
Right on. If you have a few more minutes, we have a couple questions we can get to before we start headed to a close. For instance, a couple of questions about, could you say a little bit more about MOVE's views on animal rights? I'm sorry?
I'm listening.
Or maybe talk about to what extent people can read about that in the book.
Yeah, you can read more about that in the book. MOVE's first demonstrations, and John Africa would have MOVE members go to the circus and write on the placards. It would say, Barnum and Bailey's Ringling Brothers sadism. John Africa was raw with it, bro. He would say things like, if these circus owners think it's so cute to watch a lion jump through a ring of fire, why don't they make their wife do it? If they think it's okay to make a baby tiger jump through a ring of fire, why don't they make their kids do it? If it's okay for those animals who are also children of God to do that, why don't they do it themselves? But they wouldn't, because they know that it's dangerous. So if it's dangerous for their baby, why isn't it dangerous for the tiger's baby? He was very, very clear about how he felt, and he would say that Black people, especially, who are always complaining about slavery, need to recognize the slavery of animals in a zoo, need to recognize the slavery of an animal in a circus. You think lions and tigers and bears and elephants are made to balance on balls, and if they're not doing it right, be prodded with electrical rods and stuck with steel spikes? You think that makes sense? If you didn't like it when it was done to us, why would you think it would be okay for it to be done to animals? And if you can't see the injustice in it being done to animals, then you should never open your mouth and complain about it being done to your brother. He was very clear about that. And that it's all broken down in the book, and more examples and more details about why he felt the way he felt. You can read about it.
Message.
So shout out to my man. Shout out to my man, Dr. Haight. And Dr. Burroughs, because on the Haight Awards, we gave an award. We named a whole award the Tillicum Award after that whale that they made that Blackfish documentary about that killed its trainer. And then it's if I remember correctly, they tracked its children and tracked like the genetic the revolution was passed on genetically, like to his kids who did the same thing. And we were like, absolutely, like that is pure logic.
Man,
so you were absolutely, or John Africa was absolutely right. You're absolutely right about
if they can do that, so you have to rationalize it. If they can do that to the animals, to the people that they see as lesser than, then what stops them? You know, before Black people, Africans, were brought to this country, before there was ever a war against the Native Americans, before there was ever any kind of need for Hannibal to get on those elephants and go, you know, before any of that, white people were doing that to each other.
Yeah, that's
the same thing that they were doing to us. And I know that there's slavery all over the world, all right, in Africa too, by Africans, you know, but to the degree that we're talking about, I mean, they're glorifying it too. Braveheart and Spartacus and all this, man, killing, they worship it. This is their thing, you know, and for them to like, okay, well, now we got a new victim. We, hey, guess what, German? Hey, guess what, French? We ain't got to do this to each other. We could take a break for a while and save ourselves. We could just do this to these other people who are lesser than us. They're more like monkeys and they're lesser than. They don't speak the same language we speak. Let's do this to them. And so if we can be, you know, devalued, and then what's this? Where do you stop this thing? Where do you cut it off?
So, well, speaking of that, this is a question I'm glad Hiram is here to help out with this, because I had forgotten to bring this up. Can you talk a little bit more about the Penn Museum stealing the remains of the MOVE children? And does this come up in your book? Do you focus on this piece of the story?
It does.
That was just yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
It does come up. You know, it's like, and this is exactly what I mean, man. Listen, the injustice, the hypocrisy, the inequality. In April of 2021, we learned from Maya Casuto, who was a Penn student herself. Maya Casuto called me and told me that she had information that explained that the city of Philadelphia, or the Penn Museum, Janet Monge was the professor, and Alan Mann stole some of the remains of the children that were bombed in 1985. Stole those remains and used them as research material. Made YouTube videos holding up their bones and showing them and displaying them to other people, and use them as fundraiser material. And then not only that, also passed them to Penn, or to from Penn to Princeton, drove them in their car to Princeton, New Jersey. And Princeton had a Coursera course where they taught classes with their bones to over 5,000 students. You know, and that is so, I can't even say how horrible that is. But you know what I think about it? The first thing that comes to mind is, imagine me, Mike Africa Jr., this young Black poor guy from Philly, deciding that I'm going to do that to some white educator child. I'm going to go take her 14-year-old child that died in their house fire. I'm going to steal the bones and then show them off to my friends. Do you know how much of a crime that is? That is an abuse of a corpse. That is a crime. That's a felony. You cannot take, somebody's remains without consent of a family member. You can not take somebody's remains if you have consent in some cases and use them any kind of way. But they stole the remains. And then, you know, did just unthinkable things. What would happen to me if I did that to them? You know, I would get more time in jail if I did that to one of their cats. If I knocked on her door and went inside her house without her inviting me in. You know, I mean, it's incredibly hypocritical and unjust. And unfortunately, the mother of the child didn't press any charges and did not pursue any legal action. And that is the saddest part to me, because those motherfuckers need to be in handcuffs and they need to go to jail and experience what they need to experience, the unleashing of some mother who can't see her child, and let the fury of that person pour out on Janet Monge for what she did to that 14-year-old girl's remains. We're still trying to figure out. I mean, it's so unthinkable. You know, it's one of those things where you just need time. Really, you really need to you need someone to handle it, someone that's far enough away from it to really handle it, because it's so hard and emotional to really deal with this kind of situation. But she wasn't even fired from the Penn Museum for doing these things. It's horrible. The bombing of MOVE continues to be a pain for so many people that experienced it, that remember it, that read about it. And the Penn Museum just made it 100 times worse.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank you for that. Just a couple, it's hard to even come back from that, but Todd's here saying MOVE was one of the many countercultural organizations, black and white, that existed in the 70s. There was a lot of public social experimentation during this period. I'm not sure why I forgot, forgive me why. Well, here we go. Black Liberation Media. Can Mike Africa Jr. tell us about the 13 Run Challenge and how people can contribute? I'm not familiar. What's this all about?
The 13 Run Challenge is 13 runs, half marathons that I'm doing, each one in honor of the people that were bombed. The first one I did was on May 13th. I did for Ramona. The second one I did for Frank. And the next one is going to be for Rhonda. And it's leading up to the 40-year anniversary, which is May 13th, 2025. So this coming 2025, there's going to be this 13 and half marathon. And I'm going to run from the cemetery where Birdie was buried to the cemetery where the other MOVE children that were bombed were buried. Mm-hmm. And if people want to get involved, if they want to run with me, I'm asking, we got two squads. We got a cheer squad and we got a run squad. Some people going to cheer for me. They're going to stand on the sideline and clap. And, as we cross these different mile checkpoints, and some people are going to run with me. And you don't have to listen. You don't have to run 13 miles. If you can run 5 miles, you want to run 1 mile, but we all crossing the finish line together. And it's just in honor and in memory of the people that were bombed leading up to the 40-year anniversary.
Well, on behalf of those of us who can't make any of that form of contribution to the struggle, we will be with you in spirit and in solidarity.
Woo! Some people are walking. Some people will walk across, but we just, we're going to cross together. We'll cross together.
And when is this again?
So the last one is going to be on May 13th in Philly.
Okay.
We're going to run from, as we get closer to it, I mean, we still got a ways to go. The 40-year anniversary, right? So we want to do something impactful and important. But also, from the heart, from my heart, to my family. The reason I chose to do this is because when we were kids, one of the things we always did together is we ran together. We playing tag, hide and seek. If people want to sign up to run,
where's the
go to my website, www.mikeafricajr.com. There's a lot of runs in between, but the one that we're focusing on trying to get people to really, participate in is the one in May of 2025. And some people want to sponsor, I have a couple of sponsors. One person sponsored me for running shoes. She sends me 100. You can tell she's an older person because she sent me $100 and she's like, I'm sure this will be enough for running shoes. Running shoes are like in 1980, maybe.
Yeah, right.
But but I appreciate it and I am not complaining. I'm just saying. But she
the link to Mike's website is in the show description, by the way.
Thank you. She sends $100 a month for running shoes. Others sent me running gear. Pastor Keith Collins at the Church of the Overcomer, he sent me running jackets, and so people can send different things to help me get across. 13 miles is a long run, and so but also the endurance, you got to be able to keep that up. You can't just get out there and run. Well, I can't just get out there and run 13 miles and I'm running 13 miles a month. No, you got to run, building up to that 13 every month and sustaining it throughout the whole 13 months. So people send me socks, hiking socks. They're called Darn Tough or Smart Wool because those are the best socks to run in. The shoes that I wear are Hoka size 11. Or Diodora size 12 running shoes. Yeah, this is how you can support.
All right, there you go. What was the strategy of John Africa? I've always heard them say it, but never explained.
John Africa wanted to put an end to the system. He would say things like, MOVE ain't talking about changing governments, replacing one corrupt dictator enslaver for another. MOVE is talking about doing away with all forms of external government and replacing it with the government of self. So and I think how that played out can best be seen in the way MOVE lived. We didn't pay water bills. We didn't pay gas bills, electric bills, phone bills. We had our own income through our car wash. MOVE had a car wash. In 1970 something, MOVE was making $500 a day on a car wash.
Damn.
The car wash ran 365, 20, it opened up in the morning, 7 in the morning, and it closed. And when the sun went down, and I'm telling you could get your car washed on Christmas Day. And everybody that ever had their car washed by MOVE say MOVE car wash was the best car wash. And I'm telling you, $500 a day translates to $2,200 a day in today's time. That's what the inflation. MOVE had a watermelon. We sold watermelons and, made money doing that. MOVE did not believe in trying to get a politician to lead them into some type of freedom, and so that was what John Africa's strategy was all about. He wanted to get some land and have a farm where, we could grow our own food. He wanted to tap the ground for water so that we had our own water. He wanted to live, as natural as possible and free as possible without the intrusion of the political system. One of the reasons he never left the city, he said, because there's no way you can go where the system don't follow you. At one time, this country was filled with nature, but because of the system's imposition, it now is filled with buildings. So, he felt like there needed to be a presence in the city confronting the injustices from the political system, but at the same time, trying to live self-sufficient and independent from the government.
All right. Well, look, Mike Africa Jr., congratulations on the book. Appreciate you coming through. The link to your website's in the show description where you can get the book, information on the running. Todd is already confirmed, so we'll be inviting you back once he gets the book and we've had a chance to read it and we can talk more about it. But anything else that we didn't get to that you want to make sure to say, but otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you. Listen, thank you for having me. Make sure you do your exercise, stay healthy, drink your water, do your push-ups or your band stretches, whatever you got to do, you do. Stay healthy. The most revolutionary thing you can do is be healthy. Don't let nobody take away your health, including yourself.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.